out because they don't get their own way the whole time. She is a grifter. She wants
California girl.
And Meghan seems to have wasted no time showing Prince Harry her California ways.
Last night I had the best food. I had a great burger. I love fries.
Some revelations don't arrive with headlines. They arrive with discomfort, with that quiet, sinking feeling that something you once accepted without question has suddenly become unstable. For Prince Harry, that moment doesn't come from a courtroom or a press leak. It comes from a number, a single number that shouldn't exist, printed years before there was anything to gain, before there was a brand to protect, before a royal narrative needed defending. And once that number appears, nothing aligns the way it used to.
That, again, this is all part of the problem. They don't trust, well, the royal family, that is, and the king, don't trust what Harry's up to, because if he comes over...
For years, Harry defended Meghan's story with the certainty of someone who believed there was nothing to defend. Every doubt was cruelty, every critic was malicious. One voice in particular was written off entirely, Samantha Markle. She was framed as noise, as bitterness, as a distraction unworthy of attention. Harry never needed to engage with her claims because, in his mind, they were rooted in resentment, not reality. But what happens when the person everyone told you to ignore isn't speculating, when they're pointing to something printed, dated, and impossible to argue with? That's where this story begins, not with scandal, but with a timeline problem. Long before palace walls and wedding vows, before global attention and carefully managed appearances, there was someone quietly noticing that the math didn't work. Samantha Markle wasn't chasing relevance or reacting to fame. She was remembering birthdays, school years, graduations, holidays, ordinary family markers that don't change just because a biography does.
Mental Health Day with Project Healthy Minds. Their dedication to expanding access to mental health support is exactly what we aim to do.
She noticed subtle shifts. A year moved here, an age adjusted there. Nothing dramatic on its own, but together those changes formed a pattern that felt wrong to her. When Meghan's public biography began circulating, Samantha didn't see a fairy tale. She saw a rearranged version of events that didn't resemble the life she remembered growing up around. And when she spoke up, the response was immediate and brutal. She wasn't challenged with evidence. She was dismissed as jealous, bitter, vindictive, a relative trying to insert herself into a story that no longer included her. Her credibility wasn't examined, it was erased. And yet, through all of it, Samantha never escalated her claims and never changed her version of events. She repeated the same concern again and again, calmly, consistently, even as the world laughed her off, because she wasn't speculating, she was recalling facts. And facts don't fade just because they're inconvenient.
Something that you can simply kiss and make up over.
The evidence didn't come from a palace archive or a courtroom filing. It came from somewhere no one thought to question. A magazine, March 1997. A teenage publication flipped through casually and forgotten just as easily. Inside it was a small lifestyle feature, names, faces, ages. Nothing dramatic, nothing accusatory. And there it was, Meghan Markle, age 21. Not implied, not suggested, printed, ink on paper, distributed nationwide, long before fame, long before royal advisors, long before anyone had a reason to adjust a number. That's why it mattered, because if Meghan were born in 1981, as officially stated, she would have been 15 at the time, 6 years younger than the age listed. Not a rounding error, not a typo, a gap too large to dismiss. This single page didn't accuse anyone. It didn't speculate. It simply existed, and by existing, it challenged everything built after it. The story might have remained theoretical if not for one critical mistake. Prince Harry told the world too much. In his memoir Spare, Harry didn't just recount events, he painted scenes. Archie's birth was described as calm, intimate, almost dreamlike. Soft lighting, candles, music, a peaceful delivery, 2 epidurals, and then, almost immediately, Meghan walking out of the hospital composed and ready. On the surface, it sounded beautiful, but beauty doesn't override biology.
I mean, look, they look cute. They look fine. It's, you know, they hired a photographer to do it, and they went back in their yard.
Anyone familiar with childbirth understands a basic reality. After an epidural, a mother cannot simply stand up and walk out. The medication numbs the lower body, blood pressure must stabilize, mobility returns gradually, and observation isn't optional, it's mandatory. And yet, Harry's timeline suggested labor, anesthesia, delivery, recovery, and discharge all happened within roughly 2 hours. 2 hours. That isn't unlikely, it isn't rare, it's impossible. The issue wasn't Harry's emotion, it was the clock, because once time enters the equation, the story stops working. And once a story doesn't work physically, it forces a far more dangerous question. What part of this was edited? This is where the age discrepancy stops being personal and becomes medical. Pregnancy isn't judged by appearances, it's judged by risk. And risk changes dramatically with age. Any pregnancy over 35 is classified as advanced maternal age. After 40, it becomes high risk across the board, monitoring increases, tests multiply, and hospital stays lengthen. Discharge timelines stretch cautiously, not optimistically. If Meghan were the age the public believed, late 30s, the birth would still require careful oversight. But if the earlier timeline were correct, and she were in her early 40s, everything changes. There would be no rushing, no quick exits, no casual recoveries. Medical protocol alone would demand extended observation. Add epidurals into the mix and immediate discharge becomes unthinkable. Suddenly, the secrecy around the birth begins to look less like privacy and more like control. The private hospital, the undisclosed medical team, the carefully limited information released to the public. This wasn't about hiding from cameras, it was about managing variables. Because the moment medical facts enter the conversation, narratives lose flexibility. To understand why this mattered so deeply, you have to understand the worlds Meghan moved through. Hollywood is unforgiving with time, roles disappear, casting doors close, and youth isn't just admired, it's required, so shaving years off a resume isn't vanity, it's survival. Then came royalty, where age isn't about careers but optics, fertility, heirs, and timelines. A younger bride fits a fairy tale, an older one introduces urgency. One story sells romance, the other invites scrutiny. So, perfection became non-negotiable. Every appearance, every photograph, every milestone had to align with a narrative that couldn't afford disruption, because once one detail slips, the rest follow. That's why pregnancies were sealed tight, why timelines were controlled, why questions were deflected instead of answered. It wasn't about fooling the public, it was about protecting a story that couldn't survive examination. Every story reaches a point where memory is no longer enough, and that's where Thomas Markle enters, not as a commentator, not as an angry parent, but as a man who kept records long before anyone thought they'd matter. He raised Meghan, paid for her education, and documented milestones the way parents do. School years, achievements, dates frozen in photographs and paperwork. So when Samantha was painted as unreliable, Thomas didn't hesitate. He said something simple but devastating to the narrative that had already taken hold. Samantha had never lied to him, not once, and every concern she raised checked out. This wasn't a reaction to fame, it wasn't a counterattack, it was a correction. And corrections are dangerous when a story has already been sold as truth. With Thomas stepping forward, the issue could no longer be dismissed as sibling rivalry. Now there were records, a paper trail, a timeline rooted in lived reality, not public relations. And that's when the story stopped being about Meghan. It became about Harry, because for years he defended everything. He believed every criticism was cruelty, every question was persecution, and he walked away from his family, his country, and his role because he believed he was protecting the truth. But what if the truth he protected was already edited? That realization doesn't arrive with anger, it arrives with silence, and Harry now finds himself standing inside a narrative he helped amplify, wondering which parts were real and which parts were rehearsed. His memoir, his interviews, his sacrifices were all built on trust, and trust, once fractured, doesn't break loudly. It settles because the most devastating truths don't shout, they wait. And once they're seen, they don't need defending, they ask only one question. If something as basic as age had to be rewritten, what else was carefully edited before the world ever noticed? Once doubt enters, it doesn't knock. It settles, rearranging the furniture of certainty until nothing feels familiar anymore. For Prince Harry, that quiet shift didn't happen in public. It happened privately, in the space between what he had defended for years and what now refused to align. He didn't confront Meghan immediately. There were no explosions, accusations, or raised voices, because realizations like this unfold in silence, in rereading, in replaying conversations that once felt settled, in asking why certain questions were never asked in the first place. Harry began retracing steps not because he wanted to doubt her, but because the numbers wouldn't stop echoing. The magazine, the year, the 6-year gap, too precise to dismiss as a mistake and too old to be the product of palace manipulation. It existed before any motive could explain it away, and that's what made it dangerous. He remembered how fiercely he had defended her age when critics questioned timelines, how confidently he repeated the official version, not because he had verified it, but because he trusted it. Trust had been the foundation of everything. The marriage, the move, the arrangements, the books, the interviews, all of it rested on the belief that the story they were telling the world was the same story they told each other. But what if it wasn't? Harry thought back to moments that once felt insignificant, conversations where details were brushed past, memories Meghan shared that never quite lined up with dates, stories told emotionally and convincingly but always without anchors. He had never pressed. Why would he? Pressing felt like doubt, and doubt felt like betrayal. Now those moments resurfaced with weight. Age isn't just a number in royal life, it's a calculation. It determines optics, expectations, and scrutiny. A bride in her mid-30s enters the institution as mature, accomplished, independent. A bride in her early 40s enters under a microscope of fertility, timelines, and pressure. One narrative feels aspirational, the other invites interrogation. Harry realized how carefully the story had been framed from the start, with introductions emphasizing youthfulness, vitality, and a fresh chapter. Interviews highlighted beginnings, not duration. The press kits were clean, streamlined, unchallenged. No one asked the uncomfortable questions because there was no visible reason to, until there was. The more Harry looked, the more he noticed what hadn't been said. There were no childhood friends stepping forward to anchor dates, no classmates recounting specific years, no teachers confirming timelines. Everything existed in broad strokes, vague enough to avoid contradiction. That vagueness had once felt like privacy, now it felt like insulation. Meanwhile, the palace response was exactly what Harry feared and expected: silence. No corrections, no clarifications, just a firm commitment to the version already printed, as if acknowledging even a small discrepancy would open a door they couldn't close. And that's when Harry understood something chilling. The palace didn't need to lie, they only needed to maintain, because once a story becomes official, challenging it doesn't just question an individual, it questions the institution that endorsed it. And institutions protect themselves first. Harry wasn't angry yet, he was disoriented. He thought of his own role in all of this, how he had condemned his family for secrecy while defending a narrative that now felt selectively edited, how he had accused others of manipulation while standing inside a story that might have been curated from the beginning. The irony was suffocating. Then came the memories of Samantha Markle, the interviews he dismissed without watching, the statements he mocked without reading. He had accepted the idea that she was unreliable because that version was convenient, because listening would have meant considering something he wasn't ready to face. But Samantha never changed her story. She didn't escalate, she didn't contradict herself, she didn't chase new angles. She repeated the same concern with the same dates, the same discomfort, the same insistence that something was off. That consistency, once seen as obsession, now looked like conviction. Harry realized how often truth is mischaracterized when it threatens comfort. The final shift came not from a document, but from a conversation Harry replayed in his mind late one night. A moment when he had casually asked Meghan about her early years, expecting a familiar anecdote. She answered smoothly, confidently, but with a pause he had ignored, a pause that now felt heavy. He remembered thinking nothing of it, but now he couldn't stop thinking about it. Harry wasn't naive. He understood why people adjusted their age in Hollywood. He understood survival and reinvention, And he even understood why someone might carry that adjustment forward, letting it become permanent through repetition. What he didn't understand was why it had never been disclosed to him. That was the fracture, not the number, the omission. Because marriage isn't built on perfect pasts, it's built on shared truth. And Harry realized that even if the adjustment began as career protection, it had followed them into a space where honesty mattered more than optics. Into parenthood, into memoirs, into public testimony. And that realization came with a weight Harry had never known. He had written a book accusing others of rewriting reality, he had spoken publicly about gaslighting and about truth being buried under narratives designed to protect power, and now he had to sit with the possibility that he had unknowingly participated in the same thing. The shame didn't come from being deceived, it came from realizing how fiercely he had defended a version of events he never verified. Harry thought of his children, of the legacy they would inherit. Stories become history when they're repeated often enough. He wondered what version of their family story would be passed down, which dates would be taught, which truths would be softened, and for the first time, he understood why the past matters so much, because once it's written, it becomes hard to revise without admitting it was wrong. There was no dramatic confrontation, no leaked argument, no explosive revelation, just a quiet recalibration happening behind closed doors. Harry began asking questions differently, listening more carefully, not accusing, but clarifying. And sometimes clarity was met with deflection, which spoke louder than any confession. The public, meanwhile, began noticing the same cracks, not because Harry said anything, but because the story had reached a point where too many inconsistencies overlapped. The age discrepancy led people back to old interviews, old photos, old records. Timelines were mapped, remapped, and compared. The internet didn't invent the problem, it noticed it. And once noticed, it couldn't be unseen. Media outlets were cautious. No one wanted to be accused of speculation, but questions crept into headlines carefully worded, strategically vague, timeline revisited, early records resurface, biographical inconsistencies raise eyebrows. No accusations, just curiosity, and curiosity is dangerous when answers are limited. Harry watched it unfold from a distance, feeling oddly detached. He wasn't defensive anymore, he wasn't angry, he was tired. Tired of defending narratives instead of truth, tired of fighting wars built on incomplete information. The shame people imagined wasn't humiliation, it was realization. Realizing that love doesn't make you immune to manipulation, that loyalty doesn't guarantee transparency, that protecting someone doesn't mean protecting the truth. Harry understood now why institutions resist revisiting the past. Because revisiting requires accountability, and accountability requires admitting that the story everyone accepted might not be the whole one. This wasn't about age anymore. It was about credibility. Once a single foundational detail is questioned, everything built on it wobbles, not collapses immediately, but trembles enough to draw attention. And attention is the one thing carefully curated narratives can't survive. Harry didn't know where this would end, he didn't know which version of events would ultimately stand, but he knew something had shifted permanently. He could no longer defend without understanding, he could no longer speak without questioning, and he could no longer pretend that silence was the same as truth. Somewhere years ago, a number was printed casually in a magazine. No agenda, no strategy, just ink on paper. It waited quietly while careers rose, marriages formed, stories solidified. And now, decades later, it had done what it always would. It resurfaced, not to accuse, not to destroy, but to remind everyone of something uncomfortable and unavoidable. You can edit a narrative, you can manage perception, but you can't erase time. And when time catches up, it doesn't ask permission, it simply asks you to look again. Prince Harry is now looking. And once you look closely enough, the hardest part isn't discovering that something was hidden, it's accepting that you helped protect it without ever knowing why.